might seem
Together we're
crazy what I'm about to
awesome.
say.
Hi, guys.
Sunshine
Welcome to
shades
the Anatomy of Joy. All right. So thank you. All right. So as I was saying, joy for me has been a really natural state of being. So, not to sound a little hokey here, but it was surprising to me always when I would run into people long before my coaching years. And when I started to actually learn about psychology and, all of the different ways that we experience joy, it was surprising to me that people didn't have a natural sense of joy. And so I very much took it for granted. And I'm quite pleased with myself that I did. Just sort of took this joy for granted for, 20 or 30 years. And it took me by surprise when I've gone through periods of my life now being, middle-aged, and I have all these children and bills to pay and the stresses of life and business and everything else, right? When it kind of felt like something I now had to reach for, something that I actually had to figure out how to nurture or how to find, as opposed to kind of, allowing it just to be as it was. And so the last couple of years have been really, really interesting for me in a lot of ways, as the fact that I happen to live and work in the business of keeping people happy. I mean, really, those of you who are mothers know this, right? We're in the business of keeping people happy. That's what I feel like my son my oldest is about to turn 13. And I was just reflecting on this, like for 13 years, I've been a parent. And you really do. I don't think it's a stretch to say that we wake up every morning with an intention, among others. But one of the intentions is, how can I create joy for my children today, right? Like, how can I keep, and not by any stretch is it that sort of toxic positivity that we're talking about, but just like create a joyful experience of life. And I think for all of us, that's always at the forefront anyway. And yet little attention paid to the specifics, right? In terms of how we might actually go about doing that up here, as opposed to just out here. So tonight, what we're really going to be talking about is this distinction between joy, that is a very unique feeling that kind of like comes from within, in contrast to happiness, which is what I would say is the expression of joy. So of course, there's a million different definitions, right? We could all go on Google and Wikipedia and all sorts of different textbooks and get different definitions of what is joy, what is happiness, what is, variations on a theme, right? But for the purposes of what I want to use this idea for tonight is that joy is an inner feeling. If happiness is an outward expression, joy actually endures like hardships, trials, and it connects us with meaning and purpose. So I think those of you that have trained with us, you've heard Alan and I both say, happiness is not a goal we're willing to guide somebody toward. It's just not something that we can help you find, because happiness is not in itself something to achieve. Happiness is actually the side effect, right? Happiness is the thing that happens when you live a life full of meaning and purpose. And I would say that joy is the thing that connects you to that experience of meaning and purpose. Happiness is kind of the thing that we do to express it. So a person can definitely choose to pursue happiness, but the way that they're going to get there is by actually finding meaning and purpose in life. Joy is something that I think people have a hard time reaching for or expressing when it hasn't been natural to them. So my experience with clients is that happiness is something that I think is very normalized, right? I think it's very, very common in our culture anyway. So those like English speaking native language, because in every language, there are these different ways of expressing happiness and joy, right? All of which have their own unique experience to that culture. So in the English language, when we say happiness, we're talking about something that is very, very normalized, right? So we'll say, how happy are you? We talk about the word happy with a lightness, right? It doesn't carry a lot of deep meaning to it. It's just kind of a state of being. Joy, on the other hand, can be a little bit intimidating for people, I find in my experience anyway, for my clients, to feel as though it's something that they're even allowed to sort of ask for or pursue. And it can be a little bit intimidating for people to imagine feeling joyful because I think it's just so much bigger. So I tell you that because I think that it's really useful. For me, it's been very useful to have that conversation with my clients because while joy is something that is much deeper, it's something that can, that beautiful definition, it sustains hardship, it sustains trials. It is absolutely appropriate that you could be having a moment in your life where things are actually really, really tough, where there's loss or where there's grief, and still actually connect with a deep sense of joy, right? You could be mourning the death or the loss of someone and simultaneously have it somehow amplify or actually trigger a deep sense of the joy of living, right? Like that when it gets really entangled with gratitude, that's a very pure experience of joy. And I think that's important for people to understand because if we put it into that category of happiness, it's a little inappropriate, I think, probably for most people, most of the time, to feel happiness when they're also in a state of loss or grief. So being sort of offering someone that gift of like, here's a way to connect with something that is deeply, deeply positive and has that sort of uplifting aspect to it, but it isn't reserved only for the happy moments of life, right? Like for the celebratory moments or for the positive moments of life. It can be accessed anywhere. And I'll go into this a little bit deeper, actually much deeper in about half an hour. But that's a really, really nice and important distinction that I find a lot of my clients grapple with at first. And then when they come to peace with it, it's really, really lovely because they can be in joy without having to define it as happy. So I want to get a couple of neat things out here because, of course, in doing research around joy, there's all this science, right? There's always going to be science. And if there's science around it, I'm going to find it. So here's some fun stuff. So it is I don't know if I'd say it's like a consensus, but there's definitely a prominent theory or a dominant theory out there that about 50% of our happiness is genetic. So there's an idea that we have a set point that you guys have likely heard about set points, right? So everyone kind of has a happiness set point. So those people in life, I mean, I was just talking about myself. I feel like I was sort of came into this world easily accessing or experiencing joy. And there are definitely people. I have my sister, I have my own, soulmate in this world. My sister is someone who didn't feel like joy was an easy thing for her to experience. It's something that she had to really work toward and doesn't actually feel very often. She feels a lot of other things often, but joy just doesn't seem to be one. Um, it's not an easy one for her to be able to experience. And so this whole idea of like, well, where does that come from, right? The nature nurture argument. So this dominant theory out there is that there is this set point. So whatever the set point of either, happiness, I'm going to call it happiness, because that's how they talk about it in simple terms in the research, is 50% our genetics, 10% our environment, and 40% our mindset. Okay, so I'll say it again, 50% genetics, 10% environment, 40% mindset. So I don't know. I mean, we do what we do, right? We do NLP, we do this work. And I would argue that 50% pretty vehemently. I would say that the 50% genetic aspect is in my school, the way that I think, wildly inaccurate. Because I think just like we say things like weight is genetic, while it is true, absolutely, that like the shape of a person's nose is genetic, that there is a predisposition to certain things genetically, but whether or not they kind of get turned on or off, of course, has more to do with the beliefs that are handed down genetically than the actual biology, right? So I would argue, and we're just going to move past this, but I would argue that that 50% that is genetic is probably more like somewhere in the range of, maybe 5%, there's some sort of chemical set. I don't know, who knows what's going on chemically. And the rest of it would be this belief structure passed down, right? We're all familiar with the idea of like, if you grow up in a family who says, happiness is for fools, or, you work first, play later, or, you happen to have a parent who they themselves doesn't have an easy expression of happiness or joy, then it's not going to be modeled for you, right? And so it seems as though it would show up in research very much as being a genetic um, disposition, or a genetic, yeah, it's too good to be true. Exactly, right? Like, throw in the idioms, guys. It's there are so many out there, and those beliefs really do affect us, and that, I think, is what we inherit more than anything else. So here's some other things. So the question, do humans naturally want to be happy? So I don't know about you guys, but this comes up a lot with my clients, right? I have some pretty, um, clients that really want to understand, like, is there something wrong with me because I'm not, yeah. Sorry, I'm laughing at what Catherine just wrote. It's true. Save the best for last, right? This delay of gratification, all these different beliefs we have about happiness. Um, but yeah, so I have some clients, and I myself, I feel like I want the answer when a client says to me, is there something wrong with me that I'm not happy? Is there something wrong with me that I don't seem to be oriented toward happiness? And while, of course, in our position, I'm always going to say, no, nope, there's nothing wrong with you. Pretty much whatever they ask. But I do want the answer to that, right? So what we have learned, over the last couple of years in terms of stress, is that we do know that the brain is naturally actually oriented toward the negative, not the positive, right? Darwin, you believe in evolution, and it was very, 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 very important that we were paying far more attention to the negative things, the things that were going to kill us, than the things that were beautiful, that were going to keep us happy. Happiness was nice, but it didn't, seems to, of course, we know very little about the real, drivers of evolution, but it didn't keep us alive in the same practical way as knowing what to avoid, right? So our brains, in order to keep us alive, have to be really, really focused on what's going wrong and what could hurt us and what might be a threat. And if our focus wanders from that, if we happen to evolve, the people who evolved from the ancestors who were like, oh, look, a tiger, that looks scary. Oh, look at the nice flowers behind the tiger, and just let the threat like flow through and pass through them, are probably not here to speak about it, right? Those people probably didn't make it too far in the course of evolution because they all got eaten by the tigers, right? It's the ancestors of ours who were able to notice threat and then stay focused on threat and then learn from threat, that were actually evolved forward. So yeah, exactly. Hard to pass down those genes when you're dead. So I think it's really important for a lot of people to understand that there is nothing wrong with a mind that is really oriented toward threat, but you don't want to leave anybody at effect of that, right? So we could also say that we're oriented toward eating nothing but like fat and sugar, because it's kind of true, right? Like, we're oriented toward, in some instinctive way, it was more important for us to pursue sources of fat because we needed to do that to stay alive. All of these things that, yes, we evolved that way. We could go into a very big discussion about men and women and, all that kind of stuff. And none of this stuff that may be scientifically backed in terms of our evolution, all of that is completely null and void when it comes to our cognitive choice, right? Our free will. So just because it is true that our brains, it's very normal and natural for our brains to be oriented toward the things that cause threat, and there's maybe lots of that, it doesn't justify or allow us to end up at effect. And the excuse of like, well, I'm oriented there, is still going to make you a pretty miserable person. So it's good to know, it's good to reassure that there's nothing wrong. And then you want to put all of your emphasis and all of your focus on the fact that we can make a decision, we can make a choice with that knowledge to make sure that we really accurately assess the threats around us, do whatever we need to do, right? Pay attention to that call to action, respect the fear, respect, the danger, whatever it is, and then make the conscious decision, if we want to live happy lives, to override it. right? And we can do that with that big giant prefrontal cortex that was evolved way, 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 way later, that actually does give us the capacity to live these lives that are so rich and so beautiful, and where we do get to dwell on the flowers, right? Because the tiger is, yeah, I don't know, no longer a threat to us in our brick and mortar houses that our clever brains put together. So the question of when are we happiest? This was this cracked me up. I was laughing out loud as I was researching this, only because, as I said, I'm 45 years old. So all of the research, and I did a pretty good dive here because I wanted to make sure I wasn't just getting sort of the pop research, but I went fairly deeply into it. And just about every study that has ever been done demonstrates that we are at our happiest at about 23 years old. So between about 18 and 23, this is the happiest when people demonstrate like the highest that tracks. Yep. So the highest levels of like dopamine and oxytocin and like all this stuff, like chemically, that's when we're happiest. That's when we have the most positive and optimistic mindset. That's when we feel like we're most omnipotent and invincible. It's when we actually stay more present. It's when we're actually when they do surveys and research, when our focus is actually very present. We're not overly occupied with the future or the past. So there's this wonderful sort of, youthful place to be. And then it just takes a big dive. So from like 23 forward, it takes this giant dive.
Okay, and Tara, you are going somewhere else with this, I do hope, right now. Or should we all just kill ourselves now?
And then it does a big giant you guys. So it does this, it has the thing where it goes, to 18, 23, and then we go, and then we hit about 45 years old. And that's where we hit rock bottom here. Here's where we plummet out. And then it starts to pick up again. And the next, so there's 2 studies, and I'll tell you them both, because the one study said that it gradually climbs back up to its next highest point at age 98. Which is amazing. But the other study, and actually more consistently what they find, is about the age of 69. So once we sort of climb back up to these levels of happiness at around 69 years old, and then it just sort of gets better from there, which is, I mean, right? So I thought it was so much fun. I can't tell you, I almost wasn't here tonight because I was just inside the research here. So there really are these stages, and there are a million different explanations of why, and they run the gamut, right? It has to do with our environment and our responsibilities and how we handle stress and our biology and what happens to our bodies and our hormones, women hormones. Like all this stuff that happens that really creates this big curve in our life. And I think in terms of like the blessing that we now have these longer life expectancies than we've ever had, prior to this century. And so there is a lot of research too, of course, around, you guys have all heard this, how much longer people live when they get happier sooner. So people, let me read this right. The most, I would say, validated study has found that people that have high levels of happiness were 35% less likely to die in the next 5 years when taking their life situation into account, which is a very weird thing to say, right? Because you would assume that would line up just with age, right? So you would assume that would be like, well, how many people really are going to die in the next 5 years of life. But it actually works out. It actually works out that the idea of like people who have these happiness levels, as we get into like when, we look at statistically when people actually die, those people that are truly happy are 35% less likely to die. And that, that brings us into stress. Now, this is interesting. So even though there is this period of like 18 to 23 when we seem to be happiest, guess when we also happen to have the highest levels of stress. So the highest levels of expressed stress, 18 to 24-year-olds. So it's a really, really, really interesting dynamic here, right? And when you look at 18 to 24-year-olds today, 60% of them will will agree with the statements of having a high level of stress. But the stress doesn't seem to interfere with the happiness. So it's a wild sort of idea of like, the truth is we're about that age when we start having to take on stress, right? When we actually become accountable, when we don't really have teenagers up before the age of 18 have a lot of other people who tend to take on the responsibility of their happiness and their stress, right? And then at this age of 18 is normally when they kind of leave and start their own life, and now they're accountable for it. And it seems to be the most common sort of understanding of this is it's just a tremendous transition into, oh my gosh, this is my life and my stresses, and I'm the one that's going to have to sort them out. But because it's so intense, it's felt really intense. So on these surveys and everything where they say like, what is your stress level? It's almost like it's so new. Like it's like this new experience that it's really, really, really felt. And then there's about 41% of 25 to 35-year-olds who express having tremendous amounts of stress or high levels of expressed stress, compared to about 17% of those from 45 onward, and then only 6% above the age of 60. So I'm not, I'm throwing these numbers at you, but what it really demonstrates is that while the stress load doesn't seem to increase with life, your ability to manage stress actually gets better for most people. But the ability to hold on to happiness and to move back and forth, like the resilience to go from stress to happiness, that's what diminishes. That's what's actually happening to us. It's not that there's more stress. It's that we're not as elastic. Like we don't have that bounce back factor that we did when we were 23. And I think a lot of us can relate to that experience of like, that the world seems to be crashing down, but then like somebody shows up at your door that you adore and you're like, oh, and it's like, it really is all okay and exciting. And now you're going to go to this place. And so that whole experience where I think what this is all demonstrating is that when we get into midlife, when things get very heavy with burdens and responsibilities and all that kind of stuff, we just don't tend to go back into it. So I was thrilled when I saw this because I think those of you who have worked with me, certainly like one-on-one, and those of you that have been listening to this long enough, you've probably heard me say a lot, we never calibrate on the emotion. We never calibrate success on if you get sad again, or if you get hurt again, or feel jealous again. Because if you're going to live a life worth living, you're going to feel those things again. We always, always, always calibrate our success as NLP coaches on how quickly can you bounce back? How quickly can you hit the bottom and then actually turn it around, get the learnings, reframe, shake it off, recognize that you are now wiser and stronger and smarter than you were yesterday, get back up on your feet, deal with whatever you have to deal with, the humiliation, the like eating crow, the apology, like whatever you have to do, and get back going. And that is where we have to calibrate, right? Like that, and I do think it's a common mistake that I'm not going to speak to therapists, but certainly that coaches make, is that they feel like their job was to have stopped their clients from feeling all the bad feelings. And that's devastating as a coach, because your client, if you open the door and if you haven't done maybe the best job at being able to kind of really explain this in terms of measurement and calibration, your client's going to call you a month later and go, oh my God, I'm feeling horrible again. It's back. Right. And if you're in a place as a coach where you feel like it was your responsibility or your job was only successful if they didn't go back there, you may get really discouraged, right? Rather than being able to say, okay, all right, here it is. Here's the discomfort. Here's the thing that you were facing. This is good. How are you going to respond this time? This is your opportunity this time to meet it again. But this time you're going to meet it with all the experience that you didn't have before. right? With all the learnings you didn't have before. And this is the opportunity that you want to help them recognize that they can have the same experience, the same emotions, but meet them differently and respond differently. So I just thought that that was really, really neat how that really works out. And because a lot of us here, I know some of you are younger and some of you are working with a different demographic, but I know a lot of us here are working, well, we're working with like the demographic of women who are probably the dominant demographic that go get help, which is like women in their 30s and 40s, right? And so there you go. There you go. So just a couple more things on stress. Number one stress in life. We're all young, Simone. I agree. I don't mind at all. I love, like, I'm embracing this whole, like, my kids think it's hilarious right now to call me old. And I love it. Bet your ass I'm old. Older than you. Older and smarter. Okay, the number one stress in life, money, 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 money. This is just, it's wild, right? It's between the ages of 18 and 57, the number one stress in life by a gigantic factor is money. Debt, savings, general money management is the number one stressor. It's also the number one cause of suicide. The three biggest stressors in life are money first, divorce, and then death, loss of a loved one. And then moving, and then a major illness, and then a job loss. So this may be old news to you, but I think that probably most of the people who come to see us, most of the people who are seeking coaching in life are likely dealing with one of these elements. One of these things has happened. And hormones. Yeah, Jess, you're right. Yeah, hormones. Sometimes it is purely a woman who is not dealing with divorce or moving or death or anything. She's just run into her own hormones. And that's really important to probably understand as much as you can as well. Could I say the list again? Yes, the list. So the number one is money, then divorce, then death of a loved one, then moving, then a major illness, then job loss. Those are the top reasons, and they cause the most stress. I had to do this because I thought, it is true. Yeah, right. Yes, exactly, Simone. So what people were dealing with. It'd be interesting. These numbers are probably not post-COVID. I don't know if that. Well, actually, that's a nice transition, Simone, into what is next. So I'm very familiar with all of this, right? So all of those big ones that people deal with, who need coaches, who need people like us, who are really, really well trained and skilled at being able to work with the ability to move through those. But I find, and nod at me or if you relate, but there are those big stresses. The little stresses, though, the daily stresses, I got into, like, I wonder if there's a common common experience of those as well. And of course there is. So if we look at the 7 most common daily stressors, these are really interesting. So running late in the morning or running late starting your day is the number one daily stress for people. And we don't need to go into that particular skill, but we can all agree I ain't got it. But so that ability to just like be on time with whatever the set plan was the night before or first thing in the morning. And I think, in terms of NLP, I joke about me not doing it because I don't. But I do know that it is one of the most successful things for people who, there's probably, in my books, I'd say there's about 70% of people that will really benefit from having some kind of like morning routine and that kind of stuff. The other 30% will leave them alone. The second is a long commute. So again, I think this has probably changed significantly since COVID, right? Because I think a lot of people, it may be a really nice thing in the world that we've sort of, fewer people are having to deal with that long commute. Email overwhelm. That's the third most common daily stress for people. Resistance to your current emotional state. How familiar are we with that, right? Meta states. I talk about them all the time, that it's, you guys have certainly heard me say that, like, the number of times when I say to my client, what's wrong? And they say, I'm sad. And I say, okay, I'm sorry. Can you what's the problem though? And they'll be like, well, I'm sad. Yeah, but what's the problem? And they'll go, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm telling you, I'm sad. Well, how do you feel about the fact that you're sad? Well, I'm embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed that I can't get over this breakup. Okay. So the sadness isn't actually a problem. It's how you feel about the sadness that is the problem. What if you actually were okay with feeling sad? Right. And so often that process of, like, it's not the emotion that's causing the problem, it's how you feel about the emotion. And if we all got a lot better, and ideally in coaching, this is what we're helping our clients do a whole ton of, is what if you were okay with that emotion? And I will often get clients who get this beautiful moment where they're like, well, then I guess I'd just be a little sad every day. Okay. And how long do you think that'll last? Because you broke up with this guy, what, like 2 weeks ago? Another month, maybe? You'll have a little bit of, can you handle that? Can you handle a little bit of sadness in your day? Usually, right? Like, and so often these emotions that they feel like are problems are actually not problems. And so it just, I was so thrilled to see this recognition of resistance to your current emotional state being more of a problem than the actual state. It says interpersonal conflict. So, I mean, I don't know. That seems probably bigger than that, but I suppose in terms of daily stresses, that makes sense. Being overstimulated is one of our biggest daily stresses. So again, same thing, right? When you get a client into your session, the first thing you want to do, get their eyes up, get them into peripheral vision, get them taking breaths and settle down, right? Because half the time what's going on is just this constant overstimulation. So that ability to have skills that we all have to be able to get somebody not out of that state of overstimulation and into a present state where they can be calm is so valuable. The next one is tossing and turning all night. So you guys are probably, those of you that go to trauma talks, I believe Alan is, I don't know when he's doing it, but he is deep right now into doing a bunch of learning around sleeping. And it's really, really, really awesome how much more understanding we have now about just how important sleep is. So anyone who can improve the sleep of your client, you are doing just like infinite goodness for them. And that's all. So those were some of the biggest daily ones. And I think that would be really not a bad checklist to have. I'm going to start using it. I've never thought to do it before, but it's likely going to be a checklist that I start bringing into the coaching sessions and just checking those things, right? Like I wouldn't think likely to bring some of those into a coaching session because they don't feel to me like things that I can't manage necessarily. But the truth is that, of course, when you have daily stresses, regardless of how, even if you sort of categorize them as not that serious, how much is that contributing to your overall level of stress, right? And so why not make sure that some of the things that you're checking off are those? Okay, so 8:13. How am I doing? Good. I want to not end, but I want to sort of bring this to get back to joy. And a lot of the techniques that we have, so there are, and I must have some here, there are a million different ways, right? That we can, oh, I do have it here. Okay. There's a million different ways that we can, what I would call like accessing joy, right? So there's all the stuff that we know about. You can, listen to music and you can go for a walk and you can get yourself into flow and you can smile. Like there's just like all of these things that we can do to create joy. And I would say, and I know I have lots of lists tonight, but I'm going to give you another one. I think that there are these things that I would put on if somebody walks into your office. So I frequently hear, I want to experience joy, right? When we do Cartesian coordinates and we say, how are you going to know that you've achieved your goal? What is it that what's going to happen when you get it? What isn't going to happen when you don't get it? The whole Cartesian coordinate thing. And joy, that's where I usually first see joy. because it's one of those things that doesn't come out really easily in just sort of conversationally. But when I get my client into that sort of place where they're looking inside and they're flipping this thing upside down and around, and all of a sudden this desire for joy comes out. And so when that becomes a conversation where my client is really genuinely saying, I want joy, and you have to, before you decide that you're going to pursue that with them, because not everyone wants it, right? I have lots of clients who could give a shit about joy. Joy is not what they're after. They want calm, they want peace, they want resolution, they want more money, they want more, they want a date, like whatever the case may be. Often joy. Yeah.
Can I ask, do you think that people understand joy? Our society doesn't talk about joy. They talk about happiness. They talk about success. They talk about things. I wonder if they even understand this concept of joy.
I agree. Yeah. So that's why I have that. Oh, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Catherine. So that's why the importance when right at the beginning, when I said, I think it's really important to have the conversation about your client between joy and happiness, because often just vocabulary, they just haven't had a way to understand that they can have joy without having to pursue happiness. Because I think there are lots of people that don't have a high value on happiness, and that's fine. Like, God bless them. We need our brooding artists, right? We need the people that are offering different things to the fabric of the world, right? Like where their contribution isn't happiness, their contribution is like something else. Anyway, yeah. So to allow those people to have a thing to pursue or to look for, to notice, to bring awareness to, that isn't happiness, but is joy, right? Yes, absolutely. First have that conversation. And then make sure that they actually have a belief that it's going to do something good for them, right? So often what will happen is that people, because of all those idioms that we, talked about before, there's actually a term, I have it somewhere here. It's a term called, you can look it up later. It's called anhedonia. It's a phobia of happiness. So there is actually people who have this condition called anhedonia. Oh, it's a phobia of happiness, but it's also the inability to derive joy or happiness from anything around us. And there, there are these people out there like that. So, so along with the idioms, these beliefs that lead us to believing that happiness or joy, however their experience, wherever you're meeting them, that it's not going to do anything good for them, right? Some people think that if they are too happy, they're tempting fate, right? How many people will do that whole, like, careful, don't get too happy. You don't want to tempt fate. Like, what the fuck? Like, wherever we picked that up is just like, if you could just take a big eraser on society, like history and culture, and be like, no. That one never had a good place. Like, that was never a good idea. But there's a lot of ideas like that, right? Some people have legitimate reasons in their life why they connect happiness with carelessness, or they connect happiness with irresponsibility, or they connect happiness with a lack of being taken seriously or being intelligent, or, who knows what. So you really do want to investigate. If somebody has a real resistance to happiness, you want to investigate what those beliefs may be. And I would say that sometimes there's going to be a ton of beliefs that, they don't even know what they don't know, right? They don't even know. Yeah. Face. So that's really important to suss out, are the beliefs that may be contributing to why they don't want it. And then, Jessica and I had a conversation today about our Enneagram profiles. And I won't go into it, but those of you that do know Enneagram profiles, there are some Enneagram profiles. Jess just said 4 for life. So if Jess is a 4, she's obviously not minding that we share. Jess is a 4, which is like, it's the Enneagram type that is like kind of defined by sadness, which to Jessica and I, and, people that love Jess, it's hilarious because it is, there's nobody safer in the world to go to than Jessica when you're sad, because she's your girl. Like, she is my go-to. When I am down and I am hurt and I am wounded, I know that I can go to my Enneagram 4 BFF, and she is going to have so much space and so much room, right? She's not going to tell me that I need to, figure out how to smile, Tara, and like reframe it and put it like, and there's like, so there's these different qualities. There's these different qualities of personality, right? And not to say, I would also say that Jessica probably knows joy as deeply, more deeply, actually probably feels joy than most people I know too, right? But doesn't have a high value on like happiness, right? So you got to really take into consideration, personality type and like all of these different things. I'm an Enneagram 7. I am affectionately like the Labrador Retriever of Enneagram types. So I do have a high happiness on a high value on happiness. I get really, really, really upset if I'm not happy, which has that beautiful irony of like Enneagram 7s, who are these well known for being these like super cheerful, happy, like I can reframe anything to have joy and learning and all this stuff around it. But we actually have a tremendous pull toward unhappiness, because if we're not happy, we're unhappy. And so unhappiness can actually like kill us. It can be like a dark force because we seek happiness so much, right? So there's all these like really, really interesting things that go along with personality types and with, all that stuff. So, the deeper you get into this and wherever you want to focus, you don't need to know Enneagrams to coach well, but you might want to just make sure that you're being really paying attention to the person that you're working with, so that you're making those distinctions between, if we're searching for joy, if like you in your heart know, like everyone is going to benefit from joy, but are you as a coach approaching it in a way that is going to be best for them, right? Where you're not disrespecting some of the things that are really imperative, important to them, and you as a coach mistaking joy for happiness would be a real mistake. So here are some things that I would say are useful. So I would say that like the task card, so the activity card, or the did I do my best card, however you refer to it. So for those of you that don't know this is just a way of being accountable. So good coaching always goes along with really good accountability. And one of the things you can do is get your client to be noting those things that they do every day and giving themselves sort of a ranking, not on if they were achieving the result, but on if they put some effort toward it, right? And so some things I would put down, certainly for someone who is, after all of that, said like, yes, I want more joy in my life. I would say put down like, get quiet every day. It's imperative to be able to get quiet if you want joy. And this doesn't have to be like a deep meditation for 2 hours before they start their day. This is just like, have them write down, like, did I find time? Did I put effort today into finding some moments of quiet today? It's where joy gets nurtured. It's where you can hear joy. You've got to get quiet enough to listen to, right? To find it. Did you do your best to observe yourself and stay curious? So I'm going to spend the last 5 minutes talking about this Michael Singer way of like observing the self. But these next two, one is to observe yourself and stay curious, as opposed to, of course, judging yourself, right? So just observe yourself, just notice yourself. Did you have a chance today, instead of being right inside of yourself? Did you try at some point to just step out for a second and take an observational perspective? Did you observe the world and stay present? So this is just back to like peripheral vision, and just like, did you take the time today just to be present, right? To stay social and build quality relationships. So even with our deepest hermited introverts, it doesn't matter where the relationship is or where the connection is, you've got to have connection. This is just, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2% of the world who actually want to live alone with the trees, everybody else needs connection of some sort. So you just want to make sure that your clients are working towards keeping those connections alive to have joy. To smile. So in contrast to like forcing stuff, right? Like, obviously we're not fans of saying like, just keep smiling no matter what. But there is the beautiful quote, and I wrote it down. Sometimes your joy is the source of your smile, but sometimes your smile can be the source of your joy. And I really, 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 really believe this. I do think that it's useful to write down, did I do my best to smile today? And it doesn't matter what. And I think I've certainly had the experience, and I know lots of my clients have, where like, sometimes when you are so pissed off because the dishwasher just fucking flooded all over your freaking floor, and it's 10 o'clock at night and you're tired. Instead of just allowing yourself to go into that mindless default of frustration and all that kind of stuff, you may not be feeling joy in that moment, but I promise you, if you can have the mindfulness to just choose in that moment before you feel the joy or is to actually just say to yourself, okay, I'm going to smile. I am going to smile right now. And you like will yourself to smile. And I promise you, so often, all of a sudden, you're like, this is insane. Like, if this isn't nice, what is? This dishwasher that does my dishes for me every night in my beautiful house with this like really nice tile while my kids are sleeping safely upstairs, just flooded. If this isn't nice, I don't know what is, right? And sometimes it's that smile physically that can actually allow you to tap into that. So I think that's a really, really, really nice thing to pass on, especially to somebody who feels as though they're seeking joy. Finding your flow. So this is really important. I'm learning this more and more and more every day in my coaching, that this idea of flow state, which is such a trendy word, but it's just like, we all have it. It's when time disappears. Just to be so cheesy as to make you puke. Like, where did the last hour go? Like, I'm in my flow. I mean, truly, like that is the definition of it, right? When you're doing things in life, it's so frequently, I bet you every single one of you who have done one-on-one coaching with me have had the moment when I'm like, holy shit, it's over. Like, if there's ever been an assurance that you're doing the right thing in life, like that is why I will never stop doing what I'm doing, because I literally lose track of time almost every time. Well, not every time, but almost every time that I'm working, right? I get it when I'm doing like a puzzle and drinking a glass of wine. I get it when my kids and I are fooling around. Like, I get it when I'm walking out in nature, right? So you got to find these moments when time can disappear for you. And I do think that's the best like marker of flow. Not to say that I think that probably there are people who can do things in flow that don't have the absence of time, but I don't know them. So you can let me know if there is a flow state that you know how to be in, or others to be in, that doesn't also have this element of like time kind of getting shorter, like disappearing or getting shorter. But you really want to encourage your clients. Yeah, time collapses. Absolutely. You want to make sure that your clients have some flow activity. Doesn't matter what it is, just something that they do. And if they could do it at least every week, if not every day, that's really important. And then I'll just fly through the others, meaning, obviously, right? Meaning that's a top thing on the card. Did I do my best to find happiness? Did I do my best to have meaning and purpose? Focus on what you want, positive thoughts. So these are all things that we've said 1,000 times, right? You need to focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. Joy lives in recognizing that 1,000,000 times a day, you actually get what you want. We forget to notice it, right? Like, I'm really thirsty. I want a glass of water. And like, holy shit, I just went and got a glass of water. That was awesome. I wanted it. And then I got it. We forget to notice this stuff, where like when we notice how often we focus on what we want, we get what we want, we forget to notice it. And then there's one thing that we want that we can't have, and we get obsessed with the fact that we can't have what we want, right? Instead of noticing all the things that we want, that we do have, that we can have, that we can create. So just really emphasizing that, and joy lives in those moments. It is true. I mean, again, just to geek out on joy, but like, try and do this, like getting yourself to notice all the things that you want that you can have. Like, it's an awesome day is all I'm saying. Exercise, sleep, go outside, meditation. So we're going to end with meditation. I need to bring this in because this is my own personal, I don't know, it's my own like spiritual path right now. It's the thing that I am pursuing, and it's really hard to explain. And I love it so much, but it's so wonderful. So Michael Singer is my current inspiration in life. He's the guy that wrote The Untethered Soul. And I've referred to it many times, and I will continue to, because it's very, very hard to understand. It's incredibly hard to do for me. I shouldn't preface it's hard for me to understand, and it's hard for me to do. And I feel like I have been a couple years at this now and only just starting to like get it, right? So I love his perspective on joy. And it's doing something for me after, I've openly said to you guys, it's been a tough, tough time for me, it's been a tough time for us. And so this view on joy, this way of framing and thinking about joy. And I use this with some clients, but just as I'm only going to present it for like a minute or two here, it's very selective which clients I use this framing with. But for what it's worth, I'm going to put out there. So Michael Singer has this whole concept of we identify with our thoughts and our emotions as if they are us, right? So the easiest thing to do as a human being is to have a thought, the whole Socrates or whoever said, I think, therefore I am, which is actually wildly inaccurate, according to Michael Singer, according to this whole way of thinking. The true statement would be, I notice that I think, therefore I am. Because the I is not the person thinking. The I is actually the person who notices the thinking. So those of you that have done wholeness work, this is really, really complementary to the wholeness work. So if we think about the idea of like the thoughts, I tend to think that I am the person who is sad. I tend to think that I am the person who has opinions about political parties and about my own family and about my own circumstances. But of course, the truth is that if I had been born in Zimbabwe, had somebody picked me up when I was just a newborn baby and dropped me in some sort of, house in Zimbabwe, and I had been brought up, I would have had, and everyone here can agree, entirely different thoughts, entirely different feelings, entirely different experiences than what I had growing up in Ontario in Canada, right? But wouldn't I still be the same? I would still be me, right? The essence of me would be unchanged. And so it's never my thoughts that are actually me. My thoughts are just responses to what is going on around me. My thoughts are just the preferences that I have developed. I've developed this big lifetime full of, I like this and I don't like this. I like when this happens. I do not like when this happens. And I have all these responses to it. And so as we identify with that, the truth is that it's like when we are focused on a thought inside our head and we go, yeah, that's me. That's me thinking, God, I love this. If you can imagine, it's like going into a big giant warehouse and you have a flashlight and somebody says, we have no idea what's in this warehouse. Go in and tell us what's in there. What is this? And then you go in with a flashlight, like a narrow one, like a narrow beam flashlight. And then you highlight something and you see this like big old owl. And that's what you see. And you come back out and you go, there's an owl in there. That's what this is. It's this big warehouse with an owl in it. Well, of course, it's not a giant warehouse with an owl in it, is it? Somebody else could walk in and point the flashlight somewhere else and go, oh, there's a big washing machine in there. But that's not what's in there either. It's just what the flashlight is pointing at. The confusion we have is that we think we are the owl. We think we are the washing machine. We think we are the thought. We think we are the feeling, but you are actually the flashlight. You are the one holding the light. You're the one holding the flashlight. You're just the one who is focused on the thought. And when you can start to understand that you are the light, you are the flashlight, you are not the thing, the subject that it's focused on is the thought. That has nothing to do with you. It's just what you happen to be noticing at the moment. You are something so infinitely greater than that. You are the actual light. And so all we're experiencing, all this stuff, is just these preferences. It's just this giant accumulation. And what we tend to do is we find something that we love and we have this experience of it, this response to it. And then we have all these things that we don't love. And then we have this negative response to it, right? Like, ouch, that hurt. Or like, ugh, that made me feel terrible. And then we have these negative feelings and then we get away from them and then they get stored inside of us with the negative feeling attached to it. And so when they get shined on again, when they get lit up again, they have all that negative emotion associated to it, because that thing that we're now focused on, it got stored with all that negative emotion. And so rather than imagining joy as something that we want to go in and create, what we end up doing is we sort of have these things that are all collected inside of us, these negative experiences, and we go, oh, I don't like it in there. It is not very nice in there right now because the light is getting shone on all this shit that I don't like. And so we try and figure out how to make it nicer, right? So we go, well, I don't like it in here. So what needs to happen so that this doesn't get any worse inside of me? I don't want it to get any worse. And so the mind goes, oh, I know what. I know that when this happens and when I hear this and when I see this, that makes me feel better. That makes it nicer inside. So let's go get those things that make it nicer inside. And that is a losing battle, because then we spend our whole life trying to collect things to bring inside of us so that it's nicer inside. When the truth is, it's already nice inside. It's just that we get all disturbed when we have these things we don't like, these thoughts we don't like that are all connected to all these emotions. And so if we, rather than try to collect things and ideas and thoughts and people and experiences, everything that create joy, all we actually have to do is just get rid of the stuff that's in there, stopping us from just being the light. It's not bringing things in, it's just getting the stuff out of the way. And so, of course, the question is, well, how do we get it away? And that's where this all comes into play. So that's where we want to go in and we want to say, okay, well, when something comes in, how do you know what's in there? Well, something's going to disturb it, right? The only way to know what's piled up in there, making things not nice in there, is when they actually get lit up. And so it's the simple things. It's when you notice a disturbance, when all of a sudden you notice like, oh, that makes it not very nice in here, rather than distracting yourself away from it so that it goes back and either gets suppressed or that you distract yourself away and it just gets stored again, or the experience of it is negative. What you want to be able to do is let it pass through you. Just notice that it's passing through you. Just notice that there's this thing in there that makes it not quite so nice. And if you can actually just allow it to pass through and not get overly disturbed. In there, it's disturbed, it doesn't feel nice, but you being the light that's just noticing it, you're still okay. You can be okay. You can just notice that inside. And if you let that go, and one of the ways, so that the question of like, we could do a week-long seminar on this, but one of the ways to do that is to actually deal with it, right? So when something gets disturbed and you go, okay, well, this isn't very nice in there. How can I change it? Well, that car in front of me is really making me feel not nice in here because that car in front of me is going slower. You can just notice the preference, right? Well, I have a certain way that I like to drive that makes me feel really good inside. And this person in front of me has a way that they like to drive that makes them feel good, bad, or indifferent. Who knows? But it is their preference right now. And you can do a whole bunch of sort of just reframing everything into this awareness that everybody's kind of doing this and you have your preferences, but that doesn't give you any right to impose your preferences, because what you end up with is a model of how the world has to go in order for you to be okay in there. And you spend your whole life setting these rules for the only way that I can be okay in here is if things out there are a certain way. And if you can get around that, one of the really cool ways to do it is to actually have a mantra, and to help your clients have a mantra if your clients are here. And I'm not suggesting that many of your clients are going to be here, but if they're here, if you actually have a mantra. So it might be something like, I can handle this. I can handle this. I can handle this. I can handle this. And you literally actually, yeah, sure, this too shall pass. I can handle this. And if you start to repeat this in your mind, you notice the disturbance, right? My child is acting like a dimwit. I can, deal with his, whatever mean thing my kid is doing to the other kid. And you go in there and you've done whatever you need to do. And then you say to yourself, okay, this disturbance is right in there and making everything all bad inside. I can handle this. I can handle this. I can handle this. I can handle this. And what you're doing is you're not suppressing it. You're not locking it in there with all this negative emotion. You're actually letting it pass through. And you're using this repetitive way of which you've previously done all the work around to make sure you actually believe, to let it pass through as you notice the disturbance. And then when it comes up again next time, you're going to notice that it didn't get stored with that same negative energy, right? And in time, you're going to notice that you're just a little bit happier. And in time, you're going to notice you're a lot happier. So I'm going to leave it there, but it's really important to me, this idea of where we can go in terms of different ways of looking at this. And in my own work, in my own life, joy is something that I'm noticing, this experience of just getting things out of the way to notice that it's there, as opposed to trying to create it and bring it in. And it's kind of a wonderful thing. Okay. It's 8:40. Apologize. So if anyone has any joy related stuff, floor is yours. Yeah, Carolyn, I think I see you soon. Yeah. Thank you for coming.
I can share a really funny story about
I
joy.
love that. Go for it, Sally.
I just came back from California visiting my 6-year-old grandson and my 2-year-old granddaughter. My 2-year-old granddaughter usually is described as hell on wheels. She's very independent and she's never wrong. Just ask her. Well, the other day, and she's learning to use silverware quite nicely. And we're sitting at the dinner table the other day, my very conservative son-in-law, my daughter, her 6-year-old brother, and Juniper's trying to scoop her blueberry yogurt out, and she scoops it out, and before it gets to her mouth, it falls on the table, and she looks at her father and goes, "Shit." He tried so hard not to laugh. We all did. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And her mom, my daughter, looked at her and said, "Junie, we can't say that. We need to say, 'Oh dear.'" And Junie said, "Oh dear, shit."
It's beautiful. That is joy.
It was joyful.
It was joyful. Thank you, Sally.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, are you off mute?
That's amazing. Yeah, I don't want to ask my question now. That was so beautiful.
No. Anyone else have any joy things they want to share first? Does everyone, by the way, does this come up for you? Just show me your hands or whatever. Joy coming up with your clients as a thing? Yeah. It's an interesting word, right? Michelle, go ahead.
I find that it comes up often, but I think it was Catherine that was mentioning it doesn't often come up in the language of I'm seeking joy or I'm experiencing joy. It's more in the description of what they're feeling and not as much the connection that is joy or differentiating the joy and the happiness. I find often a lot of my clients will do gratitude journals.
Yes.
So we'll work with increasing gratitude. And once they really get into it and it becomes part of their day and they really start integrating it in through their full day versus, okay, this is something I'm making an effort and committed to do, then I find that that's often a very large byproduct is joy. And so they'll often come in and be like, oh, I'm feeling this and this. And what I'm hearing them saying is they're experiencing more joy.
For sure. Brene Brown's work is all, she's absolutely definitive that joy and gratitude are everyone that she, in her 12 years of research, everyone who experienced joy or stated experiencing joy had a practice of gratitude, whether it was a, official practice of gratitude or just demonstrated a practice of gratitude, that they're intrinsically connected. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Do you think that sometimes people get confused with contented and joy, like the connection between contentment and joy? I get a lot of the feeling that they want to be contented. They want
Holy
to feel
smokes, yeah.
contented.
I like ask people for to list all the positive emotions. They can list like 4 of them. Like people have this one big lump of positive emotions. So many people. I am shocked and amazed. I mean, I think you guys might have heard the stats in other areas where it's like most people know 4 emotions. Like most people can actually name 4 emotions unprompted. And yeah, it's like one positive emotion. So people have this big heap of like all of that stuff, right? Like contentment, joy, happiness, excitement, like it all just kind of goes into this one state, but they've got lots of words for negative emotions, right? People are much more dexterous in their vocabulary in terms of their negative emotions than they are their positive ones. So yeah, I do think a lot of people, and I actually think it has a real effect. I mean, we know, we study neuro-linguistic programming, right? Like we know the difference that language can have on your inner state. And when people don't have a good resource, I would say that's one of the things that I would get clients to study who don't have a lot of access and want more access to positive emotions, is actually get them to do a study and an audit of those emotions, right? You'll get people, you'll say to them like, give me an experience of being thrilled. And they can't come up with one. So that's homework, because everyone has been thrilled before. Right? The homework of like, give them a list of 20 positive emotions and have them have to come back with an experience in their life when they experienced all of those emotions. They'll be so pissed off at you, but it's so awesome. It's such a great thing to do. Just for yourself. I mean, do it tonight, write down, just go to Google, get all the positive words, write down 20 of them and try and come up with an event in your life that matches each of those positive words. It's quite a trip. And do it with your family, right? Get your family to all put it together. I've got this gratitude jar going with my family right now, where every day we put, it's not even gratitude. I shouldn't even say that. It's like one awesome thing that happened today, and everyone has a turn, right? So there's 5 of us. So everybody has to put in their one good thing on their day. And then I pick up the slack, and it's awesome. Talk about Michelle's got one too. We actually have like a jar. So it's like a jar that we put them into, and then we're going to, at some point pull them out and read them. But yeah, for sure. And what a gift, guys, to give your children, those of you that still are bringing up children or have adult children that you're still bringing up, to give them the gift of the language of those positive emotions.
Or even mindfulness jars or gratitude jars, and incorporating those into businesses or other environments. We've worked a lot with that as well. So even we got all kinds of glass jars with, either putting stuff in them or pulling something out of them. Many, you can use that.
Yeah. So many ways. It's so good. It's so good. Cool. Anyone else with stuff like this? I think I'll stop the recording.
Oh no, keep it going for my question.
Okay. Yes.
Yay. Thank you. So your example earlier with sadness and the person who was feeling frustrated or ashamed that they had the sadness in the first place. And you're like, well, can you be okay with it? And, maybe it'll be there only a month, and then, you're done. And so when you said that, I had read somewhere that, and so this is kind of the question, is like, how long do or can emotions last? So I kind of have this spectrum between like, sometimes the emotion lasts like 90 seconds. Like we feel pissed and then it flows out, and then we're more neutral, and then we can feel other things. But then the other end of the spectrum being, they get like really freaking stuck. And then people come to us, and then we do timeline, and it's like that shame has been there for a really long time. So when you said sadness could last for a month, I was like, oh, it's like it's not years, but it's not 90 seconds. So anyway, if you could share more with like, and then with the joy part too, I guess I'll add this. I know that some people are intentionally wanting to like increase like their joy or their pleasure so that they're not always focused on the negative. And it's like, oh, wow, like I see the beautiful mountains. I'm going to like hold this experience in my body for longer and practice increasing their capacity for pleasure. So
that's a great thing.
Anyway, what do you think about how long they last?
Okay. That's such a great one. I hadn't thought of that one, but that's so true. When you do notice those joyful, pleasurable things, to hold it Sue could probably talk forever about like holding positive emotions in your body, like somatically beautiful. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So negative emotions are every single nasty one of them are perfect, right? They're a perfect response to something. There is no such thing as an emotion that isn't warranted and appropriate to some stimuli. So if you have the assumption that every emotion that we feel is perfect, right? Going back to like core transformation and positive intention and all that kind of stuff, you never want to dismiss an initial emotion. So I don't care what it is. I don't care if it is like the ugliest kind of jealousy on the planet. The initial kick of emotion, so whatever that is, so you refer to like these 90-second ones, all of them are appropriate and warranted to whatever the stimuli is. The difficulty, of course, is that we don't always consciously know what the stimulus is, right? So we always want to give ourselves room to have whatever the initial negative emotion is. Now, if it lasts long enough for us to even have mindfulness around it, like if it's just a kick of it, I don't know if you guys, but lots of times you'll have like frustration that literally lasts enough seconds where like I don't even have to worry about, I just punched the like photocopy machine or something and then it passed. And then I realized how ridiculous I looked and I laughed and I move on, right? So you don't need to do anything with that other than be human. But if they last long enough so that there's mindfulness around them, you literally just want to be able to recognize that it has some purpose and ask the question, what does it need? What does it want? Right? That question sometimes can be answered in minutes. And therefore, the appropriate length of the negative emotion would be until you recognize either its positive intention and or the learning you're getting from it. So as you're experiencing that emotion, you really want to let it like fill you with everything that it has to offer. So whatever that emotion is, like we just had like a really, really tough client, like a trauma come in, and it overwhelmed me. In fact, I couldn't even do it. I couldn't do the trauma work. And so the emotion itself was important to let it like expand to as big as it needed to be. I just had to stay really mindful of like, there's no point in letting the emotion wash me away into some like just the emotion itself. I want to know what it's about. And so paying attention to it. And I would say that it had quite a big lifespan to it. This emotion of like sadness for me, it was just like absolute sort of despair and sadness because there was a lot to learn from it. There was like a lot of compassion required from it. Like, man, we've got to change the world and we got to stop this stuff from happening. And I need to pay attention to my life in a different way. Like I need to remember not to take these things for granted, right? Like it's giant for me. It was so huge and it was so relevant and all that kind of stuff. So that was like a couple of days. In fact, it's probably not over, but it's a couple of days, but I also know that it will be over, right? Like it's been a couple of days. And then I know that there will be this appropriate time when it passes. I think that if I can ask somebody, so my client, I always ask, right? I never anymore let somebody tell me a negative emotion is a problem until I figure out if it's actually a problem, right? Because my favorite thing in the world to do is to be the person that allows a client to recognize that the negative emotion isn't even a problem. Because that's so awesome. You don't even have to do anything. Just like they leave and they're like, oh, I can just feel like this and be okay with it. Oh, that actually feels really nice to feel like a little envious and to know that what it means is that I really want these things and I don't have to like stop it. Nope. You're allowed to feel that envy so long as it's creating inside of you a motivation and that motivation is coming out in positive ways. And you're not feeling negative about it, you're just noticing it, you're literally like, man, I am envious of what that person has. Like they have this book that they wrote. And I continue to feel the envy because I continue to want those things. And then one day it may transform into like, I'm not envious anymore because I have it. I did it myself. I also expressed myself and felt heard and got my wisdom out there or like whatever the case may be, right? And so as long as that emotion, negative emotion, still has something to say, So in the case that like that sadness, like you got broken up with, or you broke, or whatever that sadness is, if you can ask that emotion, what am I learning from this? And it still has an answer, then it's okay. Let it be. Like, let the emotion be if it's teaching you still. If it's dragging you down, if the answer starts to be like, nothing, not teaching you anything, I just feel like shit. Or what I'm teaching you is you're a big loser. Well, that is not a learning. That is a very judgmental observation, right? Like, that's not a learning. But if the learning is like, you got to get out there, you got to put effort into meeting somebody because you want that connection. You want the kind of connection that comes with love and community, companionship and whatever. Like, if that's what the sadness about the breakup is still telling you and you're not quite acting on it yet, then allow it to be there. Because the day that you get the full learning, the day that like the sadness disappears is the day when you get fully at cause, right? And you go, you know what? Enough is enough. I am going to go on that stinking dating app and I'm going to do it proudly. And I'm going to go on 10 dates this month. And I'm just going to trust that the universe is going to send me a partner, right? Like, and all of a sudden you're not sad anymore because it's done. And I think that you need to really honor the person. With timeline therapy, what we're doing is we're taking people who are at the, who have had like the emotion is no longer giving good lessons. Like it's no longer available to the person naturally to be giving them lessons. It's just gone stagnant. Now it's just making them feel bad. It's just sitting there going, you're a loser who's always going to be alone and you should be sad about that. Right. So that's the emotion that has gone stagnant and is bad and we want to release. And essentially what we're doing with timeline therapy is we're allowing it to complete, right? We're allowing the emotion to complete by getting all the learnings. And then the emotion can go, okay, and now you have all the learnings. You're beautiful. You're wonderful. You just have to actually walk outside and say hello to somebody before you can have a partner again, right? Like whatever the learning is. And then it's complete and that's why it disappears. Right. So I think you really need to honor the person. I would get super pissed off if somebody took this current sadness that I'm feeling about this, like, traumatic thing that I heard about that is like devastating. I would be really sad if somebody told me to stop. Like if somebody, like if someone said to me, do you want me to clear that on your timeline? Nope, not yet. Because you know why? It's okay. Like I could probably go up over my timeline, get all the learnings and have it leave right away, but I don't need it to. It's not a problem for me. And I'm still getting these learnings organically and naturally, which is how most of us live our lives. And not everyone needs timeline therapy to clear every emotion, right? Like we do this naturally. We come in with timeline therapy when it's not happening naturally. Do you know what I mean? So like, I'll give you one quick example. Like I had somebody who just dealt with this like really, 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 really terrible situation as a coach, actually. And she came to me and she was like, okay, this all just happened and I just got this woman and now she's at the hospital, but we just dealt with this, and I'm so shaken up. Can you clear it for me? Because this woman happened to work right in our, like underneath me in the center. And I was like, what? No. And she was like, but I'm shaking. Like and I'm like, when did this happen? Like 2 hours ago? No, no, man. Like, no, it is so appropriate. So warranted. There's so much here for you. Now, if a week from now you're still feeling shaky, come back to me because this, to me, and none of us can be a good judge of how long anybody else needs. But to me, this felt like something where like, it's understandable it'd be a few days, but a week. Yeah, you shouldn't be shaking anymore. We're, having this really dominant anymore a week from now. So I think you need to really do that assessment for yourself and for others. So yeah, absolutely. There would be emotions that like, I've seen emotions that probably, a couple of months, like it's okay to have negative emotions for a couple of months if they're still giving. They're still giving something to you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was great.
God, that was long. Sorry.